I did get some more rain this morning. I'm not sure exactly how much it rained. I was sleeping, and so I don't know. But I mean, by a look at the ground, I probably got about an inch or two. And so but the rain really not going to do anything because I don't have anything planted, right? But I'm not too concerned about it because all of my cattle were effectively on grass until about 3 days ago. And so if I have these animals on feed for a month or two, it's not going to be the end of the world. It doesn't matter. All right, and if you take a look at the animals, you take a look at them, animals that are that size right there, I would say that animal right there is probably close to about 600 pounds. That animal's probably about 600 pounds. Here, within about 3 or 4 weeks, that animal's going to be 650. And, the target market weight for the goal for the market weight is 650, right? If they hit 650, I'm taking them to market. And so same with this animal right here. This animal right here, probably about 600 pounds too. Now this animal right here, probably about 600 pounds, maybe about a 550, 600, something like that. And so, if I have these animals on feed for a month, it's not the end of the world. It doesn't matter to me. It's not going to break the bank for me to put these animals on feed for a month, okay? It doesn't really matter to me. I had them on grass until 3 days ago, and, they put on some good weight. And so, that one sick calf that I had, that I was talking about yesterday, I want to say he's doing about 10% better. All right, that calf, yesterday morning, he was looking a little bit rough. I was like, oh, I'm not sure about this. But by about last night, he started eating. He started eating a little bit. He's actually eating at the bunk right now with the other calves, and I want to say that he's doing a little bit better. I want to say he's doing about 10% better. And the thing is that he started eating food. That's the big thing. The whole thing about, especially when the calves are small or even when they're big, if they don't eat food, that's the big issue, okay? Especially if they're small. And the reason why it's so bad when they're small is because they just don't have much energy reserves to burn through before they effectively their rumen shuts down and they die. All right, and so the calf, I took a look at him this morning, and he was eating. He was eating pretty good, and last night he was eating pretty good, and this morning when I took a look at him, he had a little bit of a belly on him, like he's actually got some food in his gut. And so that's good. It's still 50-50. I would say 50-50. Yesterday, actually, after I got done filming the video, I went over there and took a second look at him. Just before I left for work, I went over there and took another look at him. And I was like, this calf is not looking very good. And so I was concerned about him. And so, and I was like, he might even be dead by the time I come back home from work. And I put some hay on the floor for him to lay on. And I came back home from work and he was just sleeping on the hay. He just slept all day. And then I pushed him out of the little calf shed over there. I pushed him out, and I got the other calves to come in and just be there with them, and they all started eating together. And then I took a look at him, and he was actually eating out of the bunk. And this morning I took a look at him, and I did the same thing. I just pushed the calves into the pen with him, and he got up and he started eating. And he's eating pretty good. I mean, he's not really stuffing his face, but he's eating the feed. He is visibly eating the feed, and he's got a little bit of a belly on him, and so that's good. He needs energy reserves. All right, he needs energy reserves. The whole thing about the little calves, and it's not even just the little calves, it's the big cattle as well. The big cattle, if they get BRD and they get it bad, I mean, it's still the same thing. I mean, the lungs of the animal are not incredibly large, and so if they get BRD, I mean, usually it only takes about 3 or 5 days for the animal to die. And but when they're small, it's very difficult to get them to recover when they're small. And and when I was talking about that one animal, and when I was treating that one animal, I had him penned up with the other 2 cattle, right? I had him pinned up with 2 other calves, and I gave them a shot of Macrocin as well. So I did go ahead and I just gave them the same treatment that he got as well, just in case the illness is spreading. I don't want the illness to spread. All right, and so I gave them a precautionary shot of macrocin as well. And so he's gotten everything. I mean, I've given him a shot of Zactran, I've given him enrofloxacin, I've given him florfenicol, and now I've given him macrocin, and I've given him 2 or 3 shots of Banamine. I've given him 3 shots of Banamine as well. And it looks like he's finally starting to kind of just break out of it. It's starting to look like he's doing a little bit okay. You know, yesterday after I got done filming the video, I went over there and took a look at him, and it looked like he was, you know, I was like, oh, I'm not sure. I don't think, you know, he might even be dead by the time I come back home from work. And so, and then I came back home from work, and he must have slept all day because he didn't move an inch. I just put hay on the ground for him. I put hay on the ground for him, and he was sleeping right on top of that hay. He just didn't move. He didn't move an inch. He barely moved a foot. And so, you know, that probably helped too. He slept all day. And this morning when I got out here, he was sleeping on the hay again. And so he must have slept all night as well. And he's got a little bit of a gut on him, which is good, right? I mean, you know, very, very, very low energy consumption. And he's eating some feed. And so that's very good. But these animals, when I take a look at it, you know, next month, here in about 3 weeks, what I'll do is I'll start selling cattle. And the big idea is, uh-oh, I don't want him sticking his foot in the he's gonna get the foot, he's gonna get the food all muddy. But the whole thing about the what am I going to do with the cattle is I'll sell half and I'll keep half. And so I got 45 animals right now, 44 animals. So, you know, I'll sell 22 of them, and I'll keep 22 or 23 of them. And then you know, the whole thing, you know, with the summer coming up, you know, I'll probably shrink the number of animals that I have to about 30, okay? So I got 45 right now. I got 44, 45, depending on whether that calf makes it or not. But I want to say, well, I say I got 45 right now. I'll sell 22, and then I'll keep 23. And then, you know, I'll buy 7. I'll precondition 7 more. And then during the summer months, by the time the summer month is over, the summer months are over, I will buy half. Or excuse me, I will sell half and keep half again. All right, so that's the big idea: sell half, keep half. And then in 2 months, when the summer months are over, I'll do that again. And then you know, that'll put me in a situation where I have a large excess of cash reserves. Right, I will have a large excess of cash reserves, and I will use that money to deleverage myself. And then by the time I deleverage myself and the summer months are over, you know, I'll be looking to re-leverage myself at that point. I will re-leverage myself at that point. And so, you know, because, okay, think about it like this. I have 45 cattle right now, right? And I would say about 20 of my animals look like this, right? I mean, you know, 20, you know, if you take a look at my animals are, you know, I have 20 animals that effectively look like they're about 600 pounds, right? And so if I sell the 600-pound cattle, you know, and a majority of these animals, effectively, I brought them in at about 275, you know, just under 300 pounds. I would say I brought them in at about 275, and right now they weigh about 600. When I start liquidating them in about 3 weeks, they'll weigh about 650, right? It's not confusing. It's very easy, right? I mean, there's nothing to get wrong, all right? You know, like, if you legitimately cannot understand this, I mean, I don't know what else to tell you. I mean, you know, you need to get it together. This is not confusing, all right? This is not confusing. This is very simple. All right, this is not some difficult thing to understand. I have a small animal, I raise them to a big animal, and then I sell them. All right, and when I do that, I make a profit, okay? This is not confusing stuff. And so, you know, I'll be selling half, keeping half. And when I do that, right, and I have 45 animals right now, right? And I'll effectively be selling them at about 650. All right, and when I sell them at 650 and I buy them at 250, I'll make a substantial margin, right? And if I'm only going to raise 30 animals, right? If I'm only going to raise 30 animals, and when I sell my 20 animals, you know, when I sell my 22 animals, I will effectively make enough money to buy about 40 or 45 animals, but I'll only buy 7, right? Because I'll have 23 and I'll go back up to 30. And then the rest of the money, I will just use it to deleverage myself, right? I will just use that money to deleverage myself. And so if I have whatever, if I have, you know, well, not if, you know, when I take a look at my situation right now, I have 45 cattle. I would anticipate that I sell 22 of them over the next month. When I sell the 22 of them, I will make enough money according to the business plan, right? The business plan is buy them at 250. If I do that, then I will effectively make enough money to buy, when I sell the 22, I'll make enough money to buy 40. But I won't buy 40. I will buy 7. And then that will leave me with cash reserves, right? And then I will use those cash reserves to deleverage myself. I will have 30 cattle. By the time the summer months are over, I will be liquidating the other, I will have animals ready to go, right? The rest of the animals, but effectively the 30 animals, more or less, they will all be the same weight. They will all be the same weight, because you have to understand that the calves in the preconditioning pen, when I sell these calves, those calves are going to be the ones that are put in here, right? And when I put them in here and then I add to them, I will be adding animals that more or less weigh the same as them. So I may, by the end of the summer, I may liquidate all of my animals, and then I will have a massive excess of cash reserves. Then, I will completely deleverage myself, still have enough money to buy like 30 or 40 cattle. And then at that point, I can re-leverage myself, where I can go and buy new cattle, etc., do both of them at the same time. Buy new cattle, re-leverage myself, expand my real estate portfolio, etc., etc. But, and I'm just going to be straight up honest about it, okay? In just the next 2 months, in just the next 3 months, I will probably end up making I'll probably end up making over 100 grand in just the next 3 months. I probably will. I don't know why. Yesterday I was lowballing myself so bad, and I was saying that I think I'm going to make about 150 grand by the end of the year. I'll probably make about 100 grand in the next 3 months. All right. That's about, I'll probably make more than that. All right. I'll probably make more than that. And so, the whole thing about money is that money's not an opinion, right? Money's not an opinion. Nobody cares about an opinion. It is what it is. The whole thing about business is that, money, it is what it is. It's a number, right? I mean, it's not something you fake believe into real life. Nobody cares about your opinion. All right. If you want to, the whole thing, it just is what it is. All right. And so, I took a look at it, and I would anticipate that I make over $100,000 in the next 3 months. All right, I probably will. The calves in the preconditioning pen, the market target weight for market right now is effectively about 650. And so those calves in the preconditioning pen, I mean, maybe it takes me, we'll have to see. All right. I'm not exactly sure when I'll be, but maybe it takes me four months, something like that. Okay. Maybe it takes me 4 months, and but more or less, by the end of the year, over the next 6 months, I'll probably make somewhere around 250 grand, something like that. Because you have to understand that when I make money, right, the whole thing about me making money is that I take the money that I make and I make more money with it, right? That's the big idea of money, right? I talk about this all the time, the whole idea of like, you really have to, from what I have seen with my own life, thinking about spending money is a waste of time, and it's kind of a negative feedback loop. Thinking about spending money is a waste of time. All right, thinking about spending money is a waste of time. When it comes to money, the only thing that I really think about, effectively 99% of the time, when it comes to money, is where should I invest my capital? That's it. I don't think about spending money. If I want to buy something, I just buy it. All right, legitimately, I don't even think about it. Oh, I want to buy this thing and it costs me $100,000. I'll just buy it. Like my tractor. Oh, I want to buy this thing and it costs 120 grand. I'll just buy it. I don't have to think about it. Granted that I'm not like buying drugs. All right, like me, I don't ever think about spending money. If I legitimately, if I go, oh man, I should buy this thing, I just buy it. oh, I should, whatever, then I just buy it. It doesn't matter. I don't think about, because effectively, okay, after a certain point, the amount of money, effectively when you start making about $15,000 a month, you can buy anything on the planet. All right, effectively anything. Granted that you're not spending all of it. If you live on 10 grand and you invest 5 grand and you just do that for the rest of your life, you'll never run out of money. Granted that, you budget yourself and you spend, et cetera, right? I mean, I've always said that one of the golden rules with money is you should be in a situation where you are spending less than you make. It does not matter how much you make. You can make $1 million a year. If you spend $1.25 million a year and you make $1 million, then you're worse off than a bum. All right, one of the golden rules is spend less money than you make. I spend less money than I make, but in my situation, it's pretty drastic. But I think that we should take a look at my situation, even though that it is drastic. And when I tell you what I do, I'm not saying this like in a way that I don't want your eyes rolling over into the back of your head. All right, because my numbers are pretty drastic. All right, my numbers are drastic. I understand. I don't want you going, I don't want you throwing a pissy fit over your, whatever. I don't want people throwing a pissy fit when I talk about my numbers. I'm not bragging about it. I'm just telling you it is what it is. All right, like when it comes to my numbers, it's actual real life. I give you my numbers because I actually do this stuff in real life, and I give you my numbers for free. I legitimately just tell you my numbers, right? This is how I do it. And when it comes to my personal finances, I live on about 10% of the money that I make. About 10% of the money that I make pays for all of my food, pays for all of my bills, pays for all of everything that I need in terms of just keeping a roof over my head and making sure that I just, have whatever, drink kombucha, right? Eat shrimp, right? Effectively that's the 10% of my money goes into doing that, paying for my bills. The other 90% of my money goes into investments. And when I invest that 90% of my capital, I even leverage against it. In reality, I actually invest about 150% of what I make. It might be a little bit more. I invest over 100% of the money that I make. And I do that for tax benefits. I purchase tax-deductible assets with the debt. And I purchase them at appraisal values. All right, and when I do that, I get a tax benefit. All right, that, and if you want to know what that, this whole thing, then go and ask an accountant about it. Go and ask an accountant about it. I'm just giving you very, very, very basic information. This is how I run my business. All right, and that, it is what it is. All right, I give you my numbers, and the whole thing about this is that I'm not making this up, right? I actually do this stuff in real life. I'm not giving you my opinion. All right, I actually, this is my real life situation. And and when I talk about my numbers, I don't, because I feel like when I talk about my numbers, it's just like, oh my God. And then, people's eyes just start rolling over into the back of their head and they just start throwing a pissy fit and everything's unfair and they just start glazing over. But I don't want that to happen. And, but at the end of the day, just understand that when I talk about my numbers, I am not talking about it in a way to be, I'm not bragging about it. I'm not and whatever about it. I am legitimately just telling you the truth. It is what it is. All right, over the next 3 months, by the end of the year, I will probably have made over $200,000. All right, between now and the end of the year, in the next 5.5 months, I will probably have made over $200,000, and it might be drastically more, because you have to understand that I have not baked leverage into the pie. The whole idea of me making $200,000 between now and the end of the year would be if I legitimately just ran my farm the way it is right now. This farm, as of today, this 10.5 acre field, me running my business like this until the end of the year. If I just ran my business like this until the end of the year, I would make about $350,000 to $500,000 a year. That's how much money I would make if I just continue to do this forever. But you have to understand that I am legitimately looking into expanding my business. right? Because I've already come to the conclusion that, if it really comes down to it, I could legitimately sit here and do this forever, and I still would not have to worry about money for the rest of my life. I wouldn't, right? I mean, $350,000, $500,000 a year take home pay is enough money to effectively do anything. It's effectively enough money to do anything, granted that I'm not going to be an idiot. All right, it's enough money to effectively do anything. So, you have to understand that the whole idea of me making $200,000 by the end of the year would be if I get stuck in a situation where I am just doing this until the end of the year. Like, I cannot find myself a new piece of real estate or something like that happens. If I cannot find myself a new piece of real estate, that's going to put me in a real tight spot. But I thought about it and I said, well, if I don't find a new piece of real estate, I will probably be in a situation where I do need to pay a substantial amount of taxes, because I would have to put like 200 cattle. I would legitimately have to put 200 cattle on this field for me to get out of my tax situation, if that's the route that I decided to go. And I'm not going to put 200 cattle on my field, okay? I'm not going to do that. I would have to put 200 cattle. I have 45 cattle right now, and half of them are going to be ready for market in the next month. All right, the other half will effectively, I'll be adding animals to that herd, and, I'll be adding animals that are about the same size. And, maybe in 4 months, they're ready to go for market as well. And I'll be selling all 30 at the same time at that point. Right. And so, the whole thing about this situation is that, if I were to just sit on this 10.5 acre field and look to, reduce my tax burdens, significantly, I would have to put about 200 cattle on my field by the end of the year. About 200. All right. And I don't really want to do that. And, but the whole thing, and I've already come to the conclusion that, if I find a decent piece of land, I'm just going to buy it. Because if I don't buy it and I don't reinvest my capital, not reinvesting my capital is going to cost me a lot of money. Not reinvesting my capital is going to cost me a lot of money. All right. It's going to cost me a lot of money if I don't reinvest my capital, because my money won't grow. Right. I've always talked about in terms of cash. Cash does not do anything, really. It does not really do anything. It's not like if you have $100 in your bank account today, you're going to wake up in 10 years and it'll be $200. It's not like that. Cash, if you have $100 today, chances are you're going to wake up in 10 years and you're going to have like $100.55 because the bank gave you whatever, 0.01% interest, 0.1% interest or whatever. And so, cash is not going to do anything, right? And so if I do not reinvest my capital, that will end up costing me a lot of money. But for me to properly reinvest my capital, I will probably have to buy something around 250 cattle by the end of the year. For me to properly reinvest my money. All right, and I'm not going to put 250 cattle on a 10.5 acre field, all right? That's just not a good plan. That's not a good idea, right? I mean, and so, what am I looking to do? I'm looking to buy myself a new piece of land. But that's the big idea. The whole idea of me making me making $150,000 by the end of the year, that would be true if I sat here and did this for the rest of the year. If this was all I did, legitimately, if this was all I did for the entire year, then I would make about $150,000, $250,000 by the end of the year. But I've spoken about this. My whole idea right now is to expand my business, right? The whole idea is that between now and the end of the year, I actually want to double my business. But that would be, I would double the size of my business, by the end of the year. That's the big idea, right? But you have to understand that I have not fully baked leverage into the pie. I have not fully, because it's very difficult for me to understand, calculate exactly how much leverage I am going to use, right? Because there are a lot of various factors for it. And, do I even find myself a real estate deal? I'm looking for real estate. If I find myself a good real estate deal, then, I can go and leverage myself. And, but it's difficult for me to exactly, but as I get closer to the goals, I will let you know what's happening. All right. I will let you know what's happening, and I will tell, and I will, show you what I'm doing. I'll show y'all what I'm doing. And so that's the whole thing right now. But if I sat here for the rest of the year and just farmed my 10.5 acre field, if I did that, if I sat here and just ran cattle on my field for the for the foreseeable future, for the long future, then if I sat here and did this, then I would effectively make $350,000 a year, $500,000 a year. At that point, that's how much money I would make. But I'm not looking to do that, right? I am looking to take the money that I make from my business and grow my business, right? Because and just to put things in perspective, for me to spend money, for me to legitimately spend the amount of money that I make, it's borderline not possible. All right, like if I was going to go and take 1 month worth of money that I make and spend it intentionally every single year, and I leveraged it, I would legitimately have to spend like $100,000 a year just to spend 8% of my money. And I'm not going to do that. How do you even spend that amount of money? You can't, right? This is something I talk about, after a certain point, the whole idea of investing your money is that your investments make a positive return. And, in a theoretical sense, if you accumulate enough assets, you could even make a 1% return on your assets. And in a theoretical sense, I'm not saying that you should go and put money into something that gives you a 1% return. I'm just saying in a theoretical sense, even if you only produced a 1% return, the amount of money that you actually need to live like a good, in terms of not worry about money anymore, is finite. You don't need $10 million to, money is a kind of like this trivial thing. It's borderline, it's whatever, all right? It's kind of like this this trivial thing. The amount of money that you actually need, from what I have seen, to just live a life and not be worried about money is finite. And so theoretically, if your money is making even a 1% return, if you have enough of that asset, you can actually produce enough of a return from that asset to not worry about money anymore. All right, you don't, realistically, at about $15,000 a month, money becomes negligible. After about $15,000 a month, take home pay. I'm not saying that you make $15,000 a month and then you pay taxes and then you do all of this stuff and then, and then you bring home whatever. I'm saying once you start bringing home $15,000 a month, money becomes negligible. It honestly becomes negligible. You can effectively buy anything on the planet. All right, if you live on 10,000 and you invest 5,000 for the rest of your life and you just buy the S&P 500, you will never run out of money forever, and you will steadily increase the amount of money that you can pay yourself. All right, and in my situation, what am I doing with my money? I understand, I am making a drastic amount of money, right? When you take a look at my financial situation, I may legitimately be the only person on the entire planet that can do that does something like this. I'm not going to say can, right? Because the whole idea of this is that, if you're born average, you can do something like this. The only big issue is that it is going to take a long time and it is going to take a lot of effort. If you don't work for it, then you're never going to make it. And and the whole thing about the 10% and stuff like that, right? If you get to the 10% mark, you'll know you're at the 10% mark when you can practice for free. All right, and then you will start to develop this idea of your assets producing a return, and that you do not need to be concerned about money because assets produce money, and the money that the asset produces will actually cover all of your expenses for that asset and potentially, and realistically produce you a positive return as well. That's the whole idea of investing in assets, right? The whole idea of an asset is that you have something that is not money, that is worth a certain amount of money, and that amount of money is called an appraisal value. It's not done by some, you're not going to ask people about it. You're going to go and find somebody who knows what they're doing and ask them about it. Or if you understand your asset very thoroughly, then you can appraise it yourself. I appraise my cattle myself all the time, right? And so, And then when you have an asset, the whole idea of an asset is that you have something that is worth money, that is not money. And it's worth an objective amount of money, right? And you've traded your money for this asset. And in a real life perspective, the whole thing is that, it's, in terms of what I have seen, the best assets are ones that give you tax deductions, tax benefits, and you can knowledgeably appreciate the asset. Those are the best assets. If you can get a tax benefit, purchase the asset at its appraisal value, and appreciate the value of the asset knowledgeably, then you can effectively enter a situation where what I call printing your own money. You can effectively pay yourself whatever you need. Granted that you actually go out and you do the work. All right, that's effectively the situation that I call printing your own money. Once you understand that you can trade your money for assets, purchase these assets at their appraisal value, get a tax benefit for purchasing that asset, appreciate the value of that asset knowledgeably, you actually understand what you need to do to increase the value of that asset, and you go and you do it. At that point, you enter a situation that I call printing your own money. That's how I effectively made all of my money. And in terms of a realistic sense, and I know that it's whatever, and when I talk about my numbers, the whole thing is, I don't want people, I don't want your eyes to start rolling into the back of your head. Oh my God, because the numbers are drastic. I understand. All right, the numbers that, in terms of the amount of money that I make, it is astronomical. I understand. And I don't want you, and I don't want you throwing a pissy. Oh my God, it's not fair. Oh my God, what's not fair, okay? Because you see all this ridiculous stuff, right? I mean, if you legitimately want to know what it was like to go and start yourself a cattle farm by yourself as a first generation farmer and make $500,000 a year, if you want to know what that feels like, then go and do it. All right, the whole thing is that, then go and do it. Because, I mean, what's not fair? All right, what's not fair? You tell me. All right, if you're legitimately, if you're not even going to try, oh my God, well, I fell out of heaven at 7 and my life's a magical journey. Nobody cares. All right, get to the 10% mark. If you can't even do 10%, then that's, and you're going to complain, then that's borderline pathetic, and you're effectively just a bum with an opinion. There is no reason why you cannot do 10%. If you legitimately want to go and learn how to farm, if you legitimately want to go and be a farmer, there's no reason why you cannot do 10%, granted that you're not legitimately handicapped. If you're average, you can learn how to do 98% of this. All right, and there is no way that you cannot get to the 10% mark. All right, and the whole thing about getting to the 10% mark, and I've talked about this, the whole thing is, farming is effectively so difficult that effectively it's one of those, how many times have you ever seen anybody say, you know what, I want to go and be a farmer? Farming is effectively so difficult that effectively nobody makes it. That's legitimately how difficult it is to become a farmer. And most people who farm are not doing exceptionally well for themselves. They're not making tremendous amounts of money. Most people are not making, farming is one of those things that it is extremely difficult. All right, and in terms of a realistic perspective, I legitimately do not know anybody doing even 10%. Most people cannot even make $35,000 to $50,000 a year on a 10.5 acre field with commercial cattle. Most people can't even do that. All right, so go and do 10%. If you're average, which is effectively everybody, if you're not handicapped and you're not like coming up with equations for the universe, for the expansion of the universe, granted that if you're, then you're average like me. All right, like me, I'm not sitting here looking at a tree and going, oh my God, or looking at the sky and going, oh my God, let me map the stars. Let me, come up with an equation for the expansion of the universe. If you're average, right? If you are average, then you can learn how to do 95% of this. And if you really got after it, if you legitimately really got after it, you could probably do 10% in 3 years. If you really applied yourself, if you really, really, really got after it, within 3 years, you should be able to do 10%. All right, within 3 years, you should develop somewhat of an understanding of how to grow some grass. What does a commercial beef animal look like? And you should, more or less be able to go and buy yourself a 20-acre field. All right, more or less. That's the whole idea of the 10%, right? Get a 20-acre field, grow some grass on it, and put some cattle on it. That's the idea of 20%, of 10%. And if you really got after it, if you legitimately really started getting after it, you could probably do 10% within 3 years. And the whole idea of getting to the 10% mark is that when you get to the 10% mark, you no longer have to worry about money. That's the big thing, right? Because all of your assets will pay for themselves. And you will probably even make a little bit of a profit. You don't have to worry about the money anymore because your assets are producing you the return. Right? Makes a lot of sense, right? And if you really got after it, you could probably do 10% in 3 years. If you were slow, it would take you 5. All right, but you should be, you have to understand that if you have a bunch of opinions, nobody cares about your opinion. Let's see it. If you want to know what it was like to go and run 200 cattle a year by yourself like I do, then go and do it. Nobody cares what you think. I mean, legitimately, let's see it. Most people can't even run 20. All right, I actually do this stuff in real life. And here's the thing, it's like I am legitimately showing, I am showing you what it looks like to make a massive amount of money. Right? And, nobody did this for me, and I still made it. All right, farming is one of those things, it's a very practical skill. It's a very practical skill. I mean, it's like any other practical skill. I mean, farming is one of those things that it's very practical. All right, we're probably going to have farmers until infinity and beyond. All right, why not learn how, if you legitimately want to learn how to become a farmer, you have to understand that it is going to take a long time and it is going to take a lot of effort. All right, it's going to take a long time and a lot of effort. That's the big kicker. All right, I legitimately don't even know anybody even doing 10%. I don't, and in terms of a realistic sense, 10% would be $35,000 to $50,000 a year on a 10.5 acre field. That's what 10% is. I legitimately don't even know anybody even doing that. Just understand that I make about $350,000, $500,000. All right, and I managed to do it by myself on a 10.5 acre field, starting my own cattle business. Nobody cares about an opinion. I actually do this stuff in real life. If you have a bunch of opinions and you have nothing to show for it, that is a clear indicator that you are legitimately poor and you're going to die poor. That's a clear indicator. You have a bunch of opinions, you have nothing to show for it, you're not even looking to do better for yourself. It's borderline pathetic. You don't want to be in a situation, oh my God, I was born to be a farmer and I have a bunch of opinions. You're effectively born average and you're going to die a bum. All right. You have to learn how to do this stuff. This stuff is not just intuitive. All right. You're going to have to go out and actually learn how to do this stuff. Put in some practice, read some books, work on it, etc., etc. All right. And that's it for me today, YouTube. Y'all have a good one.